Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And in this video, we're going to talk about the aftermath of the Amber Guyger case. So some of you may recall, if you followed the trial or if you watched my previous videos on the coverage of the trial, that I talked about a young man by the name of Joshua Brown. And Joshua Brown was Botham Jean's neighbor. He lived across the hall from Botham Jean, and although they had lived across the hall from each other, they didn't actually meet one another face to face in person until the day or the morning prior to Botham Jean being shot and killed by former Dallas police officer Amber Guyger, who eventually last week was found guilty of murder one, but only charged or only sentenced to 10 years in prison. And so there was a lot of conversation going on regarding the sentencing and, the reaction that the John family had towards Amber Guyger. There was the little brother Brent, who I think is Brant, who is, I believe, 18 years old. And so he got up to do an impact statement after the sentence was read. And I believe the jury had left the courtroom at this point. And so he basically said that he forgave Amber Guyger. He asked her for a hug. And if you want to know more about that, you can check out my last video on the case where I talk about the sentencing and the shocking reaction. Well, back to Joshua Brown. So Joshua Brown's a young man, and I actually just found out. I know they kept talking about, he was a former college football player, and he talked about that during his testimony. But what I didn't know was that he played college football at my alma mater, which is the University of South Florida. And so, so that's a deeper meaning, because now they're covering the story on our local news, and he is not the first USF football player to be killed or die to gun violence. And so the players, talking about his impact when he was on the team. And so it came out that Joshua Brown had been murdered. And so everybody was like, what? So he had actually moved out of the Southside Flats apartments a few months after Botham Jean's murder, which seemed to have been a common occurrence. A lot of the people who testified in the case said that they no longer lived there. And so I don't know if people moved because of the case or if they just didn't like it there, what was going on. But Joshua Brown was one of the people that had moved, and he had moved to another apartment complex that was like 5 miles away from the Southside Flats. And so they said that he was getting out of his vehicle when a silver sedan pulled up. Someone got out and opened fire. He was shot multiple times, one time in the mouth, which people, are speculating that is a sign that the person has talked too much, and so it's symbolic of silencing the person. And so immediately the response was that the Dallas Police Department had something to do with it, that they had, ordered this hit on him because of his testimony. And so I thought that was a little bit far-fetched, for them to do that. And so when, asked, well, what's your reasoning behind that? People was like, okay, well, she's going to file an appeal to her sentencing. And so they need him to be silenced because he was a key witness. And so they don't want him to testify. And so this whole thing about him being a key witness, that is based on the fact, number one, he did not witness Amber Guyger murder Botham Jean. He didn't see that. He was coming up the hallway, and he heard the gun. He heard arguing or voices going back and forth, but he didn't know what those voices were saying. He just knew that it was a man and a woman. They were talking, at each other at the same time, over talking each other. So he couldn't definitively say what they were saying. He did say that he didn't believe that Amber Guyger was yelling police commands. He said it just sounded like a man and a woman arguing or talking loudly, but talking at the same time over each other. And so when he finally got into his apartment, he said, he went to check on his dog or something. And so he said he looked out the peephole and he saw Amber Guyger in the hallway, and she was pacing up and down the hallway talking on her phone. Where there were several other witnesses that gave that same testimony about, I think the other witnesses were saying that they did not hear her make any commands, and that they saw her in the hallway or overheard her in the hallway, but there was no witness to Amber Guyger actually shooting and killing Botham Jean. So to say that his testimony was so powerful in convicting her, I think is a bit misleading. His testimony was important, but he pretty much said the same thing that all the other residents on the floor had said. Now, what made his testimony stand out and endear him and made him memorable in the case was the fact that he talked about meeting Botham Jean that same day that the leasing officer or the leasing agents had came up and was talking to him and Botham about the fact that they had received noise complaints. And so it kind of made me think about the noise complaint, because I was wondering, like, people are trying to make the connection, like there had to be a connection between Amber Guyger and Botham Jean. And so I was wondering, because it was something she said in her testimony, whether or not she was the one that made the noise complaint. And so Joshua Brown said that although he had never met Botham Jean in the time that he lived in the apartments, he knew of him because when he would, they all talked about the echoing of sound effect in the hallway. And so he said when he would leave out in the mornings, that Botham Jean could be heard singing in his apartment, and he would be singing gospel songs, and he would be singing Drake songs. And so it got me to thinking about the whole noise complaint, because he said when the leasing agents came up, they talked to the two of them. He didn't say that they went door to door and talked to all the tenants. They came to him and Botham, which makes me believe that whoever made the noise complaint knew that it was a black man and that it had to be their voices, like they were singing or whatever. And so the leasing agent was trying to figure out which one of them was doing the loud singing. And so that was my speculation on that whole testimony. So according to witnesses who flagged down Dallas police officers around 10:30 p.m. Dallas time, which I think is Central Time, they said that the witnesses directed the police to Brown's body, who was lying in the parking lot at the apartment complex with multiple gunshot wounds to his lower body, is what police are saying. But then on social media, everybody is saying, he was shot in the mouth. So not sure where that is coming from. Maybe it was coming from his mother, because the family did talk to the attorney who also represents the John family. So now he's taken on this case. And it says that Brown was taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where he died from his injuries. He was positively identified by the medical examiner Sunday, which also was interesting because the story broke on social media like right after it happened, but they would never say who the victim was. They just kept saying that it was an unidentified black male. And then the attorney, his last name is Merritt, he came out with a statement saying that although the police had not named who the victim was, he could confirm that it was Joshua Brown because he had talked to the family and the family confirmed it. So he claims that it was the medical examiner that told him that Brown had also been shot in the mouth and the chest, not just the lower body as the police were claiming. And so Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins refuted some of Merritt's comments in tweets Sunday, writing Brown was, quote, was not shot in the mouth or head, but was shot more than one time. And, quote, many career professionals are hard at work on this case. So I don't know where, like I said earlier, I don't know where the story about being shot in the mouth came from. And it says the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office told CNN by phone Sunday afternoon that it did not have any additional information to release in the Brown case other than his identification. A spokeswoman for the medical examiner said the completed autopsy report would not be available for 90 days. So Merritt said Brown's mother asked him to do whatever it takes to get to the bottom of her son's homicide. And, quote, she suspects foul play and it's difficult to rule it out, Merritt wrote. Quote, he had no known enemies. He worked for a living. He was not in the streets. We need answers immediately. Where the story goes awry, because like I said, we have all these people that are saying that Joshua Brown was killed by the police. You know, that's their theory of what happened to silence him. But now another story has come out, and when Joshua Brown was when he was testifying in the Botham Jean case, he said that he had run into some situations with the law. He had been arrested before, that he had gotten in with a bad crowd. He actually talked about that during his testimony. So what has come out now is that back in November of 2018, he was leaving a strip club with a friend of his when somebody started shooting at them, and he was shot and injured, but his friend was killed, and that he had been living pretty much in fear, like just very secluded into himself, because he was worried and concerned about, the person coming back to get him. And so I'm not sure if the person was intending to kill him at the strip club, or if the person was now after him. He feared that the person was after him now because he witnessed and maybe knew who the person was. So the speculation is turning to now that he was very fearful of his life. He did not want to testify in the Amber Guyger case, where she killed Botham Jean. He didn't want to testify. He made it known he didn't want to testify, but they subpoenaed him anyway, and he felt obligated, that he had to come and testify during that case. But he was concerned about the publicity that would come about with him, testifying, and the fact that it was televised, all over on court TV, Law and Crime, news stations, and then he became like this face of the case because of his emotional testimony. He broke down crying on the stand. He was very nervous. He was very I don't know, he just seemed like really upset because he had just gotten to meet Botham Jean, like probably thinking, we living in this apartment complex where nobody talks to each other, because that was the other thing that came out. Like nobody knew each other. None of the people on the fourth floor, other than Joshua Brown and this one other lady, even knew Botham Jean. The rest of the people didn't know him. Same thing on the third floor. No of the witnesses that testified knew Amber Guyger. Like nobody knew who she was either. And we have apartment complexes here that are similar to those. It's like, it's just really they're really cold. Like they have these concrete floors. You go down the hallways, there are no windows, of course. It's just walls and doors, and you don't know who's on the other side of those walls. And unless you come out of your apartment at the exact same time somebody else comes out of theirs, you really don't get to see who your neighbors are. And sometimes the complexes will do things like they'll host happy hours or meet and greets, or try and do like social activities to get people to come down and mingle and get to know each other. But for the most part, if you're a recluse, if you're busy, you're working all day, you really don't get to know your neighbors. Whereas in an open air complex where people are outside, they're coming and going, you see them getting in their cars, getting out their cars, you might hold the door for them to get into the building, you actually hear them talking and carrying on. It's a big difference. And so he seemed to have been happy that he met the brother that lived across the hallway, who had the beautiful singing voice that greeted him every morning when he was leaving out. And so that's what we were thinking during the testimony. But then now that all this is coming out about the previous shooting, the fact that he was afraid that this person was going to come back and get him, it kind of gives a different meaning on, why he was so emotional during that testimony. I think he may know who the person was, because in the other article that I was reading, I guess the police are following up on those leads to see what was going on. But just a horrible situation. There was a girl who said that they used to date each other, but they broke up about 6 months ago. She posted some video on Twitter, saying that he was a really nice, really great guy. But just overall, all around sad situation, that yet another young brother has lost his life to senseless violence. So guys, let me know, do you think that this new story that's coming out about the shooting from last year, is that relevant? Does that change your mind about what actually went down? Do you think it was a random act of violence? Or do you think that the police were somehow involved? Like maybe they knew who the shooter was from the November case and kind of slipped him the address? Or do you just think that the person, he resurfaced because of the trial, and then the person just followed him home one day and took their shot, took advantage of the opportunity? Like, what are your thoughts on what happened? To the family of Joshua Brown, deepest condolences, deepest sympathies in the loss of your son. Like, this is just such a horrific and tragic situation, and I just really hate to see that yet another young black man's life has been taken for no apparent reason. So before I go, want to touch back on the Botham Jean family situation. They were on the Dr. Phil show on last Thursday. If you get a chance to pull that up, it was a really good show. They were the entire hour. I don't think there was an audience presence. I think it was just Dr. Phil and the family sitting there talking. And, basically the brother Bryant was saying that he felt he had to forgive Amber Guyger in order to move forward, that he didn't want hatred to grow in his heart against her. So he felt that the only way he could move on and honor his brother's memory is if he forgave her. The mother, there's a video that's circulating that seemed to have gotten buried in the news feed, and it was of the press conference that the family held after everything had died down and they were finally leaving the courtroom. And they were basically saying that it was a corrupt system. They talked about evidence being tampered with, evidence that was missing, how they handled the crime scene, how the police officers were turning off their body cam. I guess when they were standing there talking to Amber Guyger, body cameras were turned off, body cameras turned off in the cars. And so they were grateful for the guilty verdict, considering, everything that happened as far as gathering the evidence in the case. They basically saying that, they understand forgiveness, and all of that, but it wasn't this big kumbaya moment that everybody was trying to make it out to be. And then there was a video where the family had gone to Botham Jean's, the church that he was a member of, and they spoke at that church the night of the verdict coming down, or the sentencing coming down. Well, they were the same day, okay? Because I think they did the verdict and then they got the instruction on the sentencing. They left out and then they came back. But they were at the Church of Christ that Botham was a member of, and they talked there. And the father, he said something to the effect of, he doesn't forgive her right now, but he hopes over time that he could, eventually forgive her, and, maybe they could even become friends, because that's what, Christ that would be the Christ-like thing to do, is to bury any grudges or whatever. And so people, were talking about that. And I think at the end of the day, none of us know what we would do, how we would feel, how we would react if we were in that situation. And we should be thankful that we're not in that same situation, so that we won't know how we would need to react in that case. And it's easy to sit and say, I wouldn't have hugged her, I wouldn't have forgiven her. But until you're in that moment, you don't know what you would feel. And so they were pretty much, I don't even like the fact that they had to be in a position where they had to explain their anger or their empathy or their willingness to forgive or not forgive, that they even had to explain that to anybody, because that's really a personal decision. But I do understand on the other side how we always we are always shown forgiving people who trespass against us, but we never see those trespassers showing black people forgiveness. And so I understand that anger wholeheartedly. And I don't know, I think if I was in that situation, I know, I don't think, I mean, the me today would not be hugging, asking to hug, wanting to express that I forgive this person. I would seek solace in my heart. I would talk it over with God, but I don't think I would have felt a need to put on this public display and, just kind of like draw away, from what this woman has done and the verdict and the sentencing and all of that. But like I say, until you're in that situation, you don't know how you would react. And Pastor Jamal Bryant, he let his feelings be known about how he felt about the verdict. And so I'm going to read that to you guys. So first off, Jamal Bryant put up this this meme, right? And so the meme had a picture of Brandt hugging Amber Guyger, the judge hugging Amber Guyger, and then the police officer, the bailiff or whatever she was, that was running her fingers through Amber Guyger's hair and trying to fix her hair up. And so what Jamal Bryant had to say was, he says, I can't hold my peace. We are witnessing the last vestige of slave religion. Forgiveness doesn't replace justice. I'm afraid African Americans have contracted Stockholm Syndrome in the sanctuary, and if you don't believe me, invert the narrative. Imagine that a black male officer breaks into a white female praise leader's apartment. Would a white judge hug him, and would a white bailiff fix his hair? No, where did I find Mary asking to hug Pontius Pilate? A 10-year sentence is a slap in the face to a community that has been flushed down the prison pipeline for lesser offenses. This demonstration of post-traumatic slave syndrome weakens our demand for liberty and justice for all. Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes prophetically penned, quote, Negroes sweet, docile, humble, and kind, beware of the day they change their mind. And so people were not happy with Jamal Bryant after he posted that. Someone named Lady Transvet says, if it was possible, go to jail for all. If it was possible to go to jail for all sin, we all would have been sentenced at least once in our lives. The word of God says that vengeance is mine. Stop putting trust in man and the justice system. If someone offends us in any way and we say, God, I want justice, and it wasn't like me, and it wasn't like we thought it should be, and we say they didn't get what they deserve, that is still unforgiveness. And so she had 143 replies to her comment. And so then there was another lady, Gloria Coleman, says, this boy is 18 years old and y'all talking about slavery. This young man has a pure heart. Please do not contaminate it with your mess. He brings hope to his generation. And then Just Chris 3 says, and just like that, we see the human, unhearted heart of, quote, leader. Father, cover us all. I pray that you work on people individually and teach the true meaning of forgiveness, because even your shepherds are lost. Then Don Michi wrote, totally disagree. Shame on you, Pastor. Jess Mason wrote, I'm glad you're not God. I'd be dead by now. And then William Murphy, who's another pastor, replied, this is not justice at Jamal Bryant. The hugging is an intentional distraction, and I'm glad you're speaking out and providing another perspective. If it were a black female officer, she would have gotten thrown under the prison. Then someone named Zavonda Renee wrote, that man need that forgiveness for himself. You looking at the justice and but he looking at peace. Which would you rather have? God speaks of forgiveness, but you know that, right, Jamal? He forgave you. People forgave you. Should man judge and say you didn't deserve it? Rather in court or not? The Lord is working, let him be God, because the judgment that's coming shall not have mercy this time. For the most part of the thousands of responses to what Jamal said, they were overwhelmingly against his train of thought and felt that he should have appreciated what Brant did and how the family was responding. Then someone named Just a Little Lynn wrote, I'm so glad you were brave enough to say it. Something because we're saved and Christians that we always have to cower down in the face of injustice. Accept whatever is given and be thankful. Forgiveness is one thing. Catering to a murder is a completely different thing. So you can go and read all of the comments if you want to. Like I say, there's thousands of them. And I just thought it was interesting. I was shocked, to be honest with you, when I opened up Instagram and that was the first post there. And I was like, oh, Lord, Jamal, did you really say that? But, there was two sides to the coin. There were a lot of people angry about the hugging. And I don't think people were angry about the forgiveness aspect as much as they were angry about hugging her and sort of like, relieving her of the burden. I mean, that's what prison is about. Go to prison and think about what you did. Like, don't make the person feel better about the fact that they killed your loved one. So just a mixed bag, mixed emotions about that whole situation. But even sadder, the fact that Joshua Brown lost his life. So go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.